Good morning, everyone. Today's topic will be on polymorphism. Now, what is polymorphism? It describes the concept that objects of different types can be accessed through the same interface. It is also the ability of a method to take on many forms. Variables, functions, and objects can also exist in multiple forms, and its methods include overriding and overloading. Now, there are two types of polymorphism. The first one is compile-time polymorphism, which delves into method overloading. And the second one is runtime polymorphism, which delves into method overriding. Now, let us define what method overloading is. In Java, two or more methods can have the same name if they have different parameters, be it either if they have different types of parameters or different number of parameters. Those methods are called overloaded methods, and that feature is called method overloading. Now let us look at this example. In this example, the first and second methods have the same name, but they have different parameters. The first one accepts int a and the second one accepts string a. So the output of the first one would be got integer data and the second method's output would be got string object. That's how method overloading. In overriding, we have something called inheritance. Inheritance is a property that allows us to derive a new class or a subclass from an existing class called a superclass. That subclass then takes on the methods and attributes of the superclass. In our example, as you can see, our superclass is animal and our subclass is dog. However, both animal and dog both have the same method, so dog overrides animals. Therefore, the output would be I am a dog. Now we will move on to real life application of polymorphism. Suppose if you are in a classroom that you behave like a student. When you are in a market, at that time you behave like a customer. When you are at your home, at that time you behave like a son or daughter. Here in this example, we see one person portray different behaviors. So to summarize, there are two types of polymorphism. Compile-time polymorphism, which delves into method overloading, and runtime polymorphism, which delves into method overriding. Overloading occurs when two or more methods in one class have the same method name but different parameters. And overriding means having two methods with the same method name and parameters. One of the methods is in the parent class and one method is in the child class. Now we move on. And finally, we will talk about inheritance. Inheritance in Java is a mechanism in which one object acquires all of the properties and behaviors of a parent object. The idea behind inheritance in Java is that you create new classes that are built upon existing classes. When you inherit from an existing class, you can reuse methods and fields of the parent class. Now, why is polymorphism important? Polymorphism is important because it allows code to take on different shapes or forms, which allows for ease of coding. So that's basically it. More on polymorphism in the next video, which will be covered by my partner. So thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something today.
So I'm going to be talking about static and dynamic binding, which is a subtopic of polymorphism. So it is still under object-oriented programming. So before defining what static and dynamic binding is, I'll first be defining what binding is. So it is basically a link between the method call and method definition, or method declaration and method definition. So there are two types of binding, the first being static binding, also known as early binding, and it basically happens at compile time, and it is also resolved at compile time. So in here, it can only include static, private, and final methods because methods cannot be overridden. So this in the type of class is determined by compile time. So as an example here, we have two classes, the class human and the class boy. So in this class we have a static method called walk, and it's going to print out this statement called human walks. And in this class we have boy extends human, which also has the same method name, and it's also static, and its print statement is boy walks, sorry. So and then we have object reference. Although both classes have the same method walk, but the method is static, which means it cannot be overridden. Here we have two classes, class human and class boy. They have the same method walk, but the method is static, which means that the it cannot be overridden. So even though there is the object of boy class while creating the object obj, the parent class is still called because the reference is human type. So the next type of binding is called dynamic binding, which is also known as late binding. So this happens at runtime, and this is when compiler is not able to resolve binding. So one thing to remember is that compile time comes before runtime. So the type of object is determined at runtime. So method overloading is a perfect example of dynamic binding because both the parent and child class have the same method, and in this case, the type of object determines which method is to be executed. So this is what the third point means. So we have a similar example here, except the only difference is that overriding is actually happening. Since the methods are not static, private, or final, the class demo will override human class, so therefore the output would be boy walks and human walks. So that's pretty much it. So as a summary, static binding happens at compile time. So any binding of overloaded method is static, and any binding of overridden method is dynamic. I hope I hope you guys learned something, and thank you for watching.